and beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself.
Shalom, children. Today we are going to be taking a deeper look at this week's Torah portion to see where it speaks of Yeshua Ha'Mashiach. We are in the book of Bereshit. The parashah this week is called Toldot, which in Hebrew means generations. Let's hear a summary of the parashat. Yitzhak and Rivka have been married for 20 years. They have not yet had any children, so Yitzhak pleads with Yahweh. Rivka becomes pregnant with twins. The two children struggle within her. Yahweh tells Rivka that there are two nations in her womb, that the younger will prevail over the elder. Esav is born first. Yaakov is then born, clutching hold of Esav's heel. Esav grows up to be a man of the field, whilst Yaakov dwells in the tents of learning. Yitzhak favors his son Esav, whilst Rivka favors Yaakov. After a long day's hunting, Esav is hungry and sells his firstborn rights to Yaakov in exchange for a pot of red lentil stew. There is a famine in the land. Yitzhak moves to settle in Gerar, the land of the Philistines. Yitzhak farms the land and becomes very prosperous. He reopens wells previously dug by his father Abraham. He digs more wells. There is strife with the Philistines over these wells. Yitzhak grows old and blind. Before he dies, he wishes to bless Esav with the firstborn blessing. Whilst Esav is out hunting, Rivka dresses Yaakov in his brother's clothing and sends him before his father. Yitzhak blesses Yaakov, believing him to be Esav. Esav returns from the hunt and discovers that the blessing has been given to his younger brother. Yitzhak and Esav cry bitter tears. Yaakov flees to Haran to escape the wrath of his brother, after Yitzhak had instructed him to go to his uncle Laban's house to seek a wife from amongst his mother's family. Yeshua said, "If you believed Moshe, you would believe me, because he wrote about me." So let's dig a bit deeper to see if we can find Yeshua in the scriptures. Have you ever said something, then realized you probably shouldn't have, but then you just kept on talking and talking? This is sometimes called digging a hole for yourself. Well, today we are going to be learning about some people who were digging real holes, and lots of them. But first, let's take a closer look at the twin boys who were born to Rivka. We read of Esav that he was a cunning hunter, a man of the field. The word for field in Hebrew is sadeh. It can mean the place where wild beasts live. We read of Yaakov that he was a mild man, dwelling in tents. Mild in Hebrew is tam. It can mean to be perfect, complete, lacking nothing, someone who has integrity. We also learn Yaakov dwelt in tents. The Hebrew word for tent is ochel. What is interesting is that ochel is the same word to describe the tabernacle of Yahweh. The two brothers present two different ways to live. Esav was quite at home running with wild beasts. whilst Jacob chose to make his dwelling in the tabernacle of Yahweh. Esau was driven by his own desires, that is, he wanted to please himself and not Yahweh. We see evidence of this when he quickly sold his firstborn blessing to his younger brother for a simple pot of stew. How very sad for Esau. The disciple Yohanan would later write, "For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes, is not from the Father, but is from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of Adonai lives forever." Jacob, who was described as Taum, went on to inherit the firstborn blessing and would become the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. As Yeshua said, Adonai blesses those who are humble. They will inherit the whole earth. When I think of Jacob, described as dwelling in tents, I picture someone who moves around a lot, someone who does not consider anywhere in particular to be his home. This reminds me of when Yeshua was brought before Pilate. He was being questioned by the leader and told him, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Yehudim. But my kingdom is not of this world." A famine was in the land where Yitzhak and his family lived. This had forced him to leave in search of more fertile land. Adonai had appeared to Yitzhak, telling him to not go down to Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim, or Egypt in the scriptures, represents a place of slavery, that is, bondage to sinful ways. Yahweh didn't want Yitzhak to seek help from that nation, because he didn't want them to fall into the trap of following their customs and worshipping their gods. You see, children, there is a way that does seem right to a man, but it's the way to death. Yeshua said, "Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction." And do you remember, we learned there was only one entrance to the safety of the ark. And that entrance is Yeshua, the Word of Adonai made flesh. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Yitzhak journeyed to the town of Gerar, where the Philistines lived. Now the people who dwelt there were not followers of Yahweh. Rather, they worshipped other gods such as Dagon, and as we will hear, they were not a very friendly bunch either. Adonai told Yitzhak, "Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you." And indeed, Yitzhak certainly was blessed. He sowed seed and reaped 100 times more. Now, let me ask you, do you think the Philistines living in Gerar were happy for Yitzhak and thought to join him and put away their false gods? No, instead they were very jealous of his prosperity. They filled in the water wells that Abraham had dug years before and told Yitzhak to leave. So Yitzhak moved to the valley of Gerar, where his servants dug new wells and found running water. But this just caused more trouble with the Philistine shepherds. So Yitzhak moved again, and his men dug yet another well. But the Philistines didn't like that either. They wanted all that water for themselves, even though they had not done the hard work of digging in the dry ground. Yitzhak moved on and dug yet another well. The men had put in a lot of time and effort looking for fresh water. But you see, when you live in a place like Gerar, Finding water means finding life. Today, most of us can go to a tap and out pours lovely fresh drinking water. But back in those days, digging wells and hauling water jugs was heavy work. So imagine the shock of the Samaritan woman at the well when she heard Yeshua tell her, "Whoever drinks the water I will give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water, welling up to eternal life." Perhaps she thought to herself, "Oh, this is wonderful news. No more hauling up of those heavy skins of water." But Yeshua was explaining to her that as water brings life to a thirsty, dry place, so too his teachings about walking in kingdom ways bring life. Physical water quenches the thirst of our physical bodies, but words of life quench the thirst of our souls. The prophet Jeremiah warned those who would listen, "My people have committed evil. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters." He added, "Blessed is the man who trusts in Adonai, whose hope is Adonai, for he shall be like a tree planted by the waters." Let's read what it says about these waters in the last book of our Bibles. "He showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street, and on either side of the river, was the tree of life. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations." Well, children, that is the end of our study for today. So we will see you next time, when we search the scriptures together. Shalom.